Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lost Treasure Stories. Thanks for stopping by. Our first story in this episode is coming right up, but first we want to introduce ourselves to all new visitors. We have hundreds of stories in our files from over 45 years of historical research. So if you like real, authentic, lost treasure stories, you're gonna love our channel, so go ahead and hit that little red subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, so you don't miss any new episodes when they get posted. And as a gift from us, to you, as a new subscriber, we invite you to leave a comment below of the county and state that you live in, and we'll post a lost treasure story as close to you as possible. While we can't guarantee you anything, it's not unusual for us to post a requested story within 15 to 30 miles of the request. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button down there, and leave us a comment. And now, it's time for the first lost treasure story in this episode, and don't forget, there's a special lost treasure found story at the end of this video. This lost treasure article appeared in the Times-Picayune, a Mississippi newspaper, on August 18, 1955. The title of the article is, Buried Treasure Recalled by Slave's Son. It reads like this. J.S. Adams, Negro, 86, told us Wednesday, my parents were slaves to Cooper Hodges' parents. I want to locate Cooper Hodges so I can tell him about money buried on his father's plantation, buried there by my father and mother. I'm advertising at Uptown 5030, or 4925 1/2 Frederick Street, to locate Cooper Hodges. He would be way over 90 years, I guess over 100, if living, as he was considerably older than me, and I'm 86. If he's dead, I want to contact his children or relatives. My mother and father, both slaves to the Hodges family, used to tell me about the sack of silver money they buried to hide it from the Yankees during the war. It took 3 people to load it on a mule. Hodges was very wealthy back in slave times. My parents buried a lot of other money too. But Cooper Hodges' father was paralyzed after the war between the states. So far as I know, the Hodges family never did dig up any of the money. The Hodges family helped my parents some years ago, and now I want to help them. The family plantation is awfully run down and dilapidated, but somebody's liable to fix it up and come across all that money with a bulldozer. It ought to be the Hodges folks. I want to locate them, they don't live on a plantation anymore. I'd like to help them find what my parents buried, nearly 100 years ago back in 1861. And that's the end of This Lost Treasure story.
Okay guys, as a side note to this story, our physical check of this site shows a positive target of 100 plus pounds of silver. Our research also shows that the target is in glass jars. If you were to load a bunch of glass jars of silver coins onto a mule for transport, you would need to put the jars into a sack first. Does that make sense? And being over 100 pounds, it would make sense that it took 3 people to load and secure it on a mule. I can't tell you how we came to the conclusion of the location, or the fact that it is in glass jars. In fact, I can't even tell you why I can't tell you. My secret partner and I probably won't be making a recovery attempt at this site. To be honest with you, we've got bigger fish that we want to fry. But if I lived close to the target coordinates here, I would definitely go for it. Okay, let's move on to the next story.
There is an absolutely wild and weird twist to this lost treasure story in the last article in this story. These first 2 newspaper articles are courtesy of genealogytrails.com. There is a link to their website in the video description box. This first article is from the Topeka Weekly Capital, May 30, 1889. The inhabitants of the northern part of this county are excited by the discovery of the dead body of W.T. Proctor, a bachelor who lived alone on a farm north of Hurton, a small town on the Missouri Pacific. Proctor was 65 years old and had been a widower for 30 years. He had lived on his farm ever since the territorial days of Kansas. He received the title to his farm from the government and had never transferred or mortgaged it. He lived alone in faith and exposed to the weather. He was a frugal man and accumulated much money, which he always converted into gold. He had no bank account, and it is believed that his murderers, after forcing him to reveal the hiding place of his gold, killed him and then took the booty. His pistol was found in the house fully charged. His knife was unopened in his pocket. Proctor's throat was cut from ear to ear and a bullet hole was just above the left eye. No blood was found on the floor and there were no evidences of a struggle in the room. The body has the appearance of having been dead 4 or 5 days. Investigation revealed the place of the murder, a clump of bushes 40 feet from the house. Here there were marks of a struggle and the ground was covered with blood. The discovery of the body was made by 2 neighbors whose attention was directed to the famished stock by a boy named Shiver. Here's an article telling of the arrest of 2 men for the Proctor murder. The article is from the Kansas City Star, June 12, 1889. Coming up is a newspaper article that tells the details of the accused murderers, and why Mr. Proctor's gold coins were most likely not found. He wasn't murdered for his money. Edward Seiler and James Wiley have been arrested for the murder of W. Proctor on his farm in the northwest part of this county a short time ago. Seiler was Proctor's nearest neighbor, their farms joining. The neighbors assert that Seiler and Proctor were not on friendly terms, and that they had frequent wrangles over a line of fence and over Proctor's cattle trespassing on Seiler's lands. These quarrels, coupled with conflicting stories and damaging statements made by Wiley, Seiler's hired man, recently, while on a visit to Missouri, together with certain other facts in possession of the county attorney, were deemed of sufficient weight to justify the arrest of Seiler and Wiley. The theory of the murder now is that several weeks ago Proctor and Seiler engaged in a quarrel. Both men being quick-tempered, they came to blows and in the altercation, Proctor was shot. His body was carried to his house, and his throat cut to create the impression that he had committed suicide. Seiler, who is well-to-do, came to Atchison County from Platte County, Missouri about 8 years ago. He has always borne a good reputation. Wiley has also heretofore borne a good name, although but little is known of his antecedents. That's the end of this lost treasure story. In conclusion, we're interested in what you think happened to William Proctor's lost gold coin cache. Do you think Seiler and Wiley found it? Leave us a comment below and give us your opinion. Here at Lost Treasure Stories, we tend to believe that it wasn't found, based on the fact that Mr. Proctor was killed in a fight. It doesn't sound like the killers came for his gold. But it's still possible that they ended up with it, because most everybody in that area knew about his buried gold. Seiler and Wiley would have known about it too. Knowing this, did they look for it after they drug the body back into the house? Another thought is, maybe he did commit suicide. After all, it's possible that if he was forced to tell them where his money was hidden, and he knew that they wiped him out of all of his money, maybe that drove him to suicide? If it was in fact suicide. Or maybe the argument that led to Mr. Proctor's death was all about trying to get him to give up his gold. Oh well, like a lot of lost treasure tales, there are many possibilities. Here's a lost treasure story from a Springfield, Maine newspaper article as it appeared on May 9, 1897. As soon as the frost comes out of the ground enough to permit men to work with spades and pickaxes, a party will start from this village and explore the old Mallett farm for buried gold. Frank Davis of Linneus has been here for a week, using his divining rod on different parts of the farm, and has found spots where, he is sure, some kind of valuable metal is concealed. Though Davis is a skilled manipulator of the witch hazel wand, having located dozens of hidden springs of living water without making a single mistake, he cannot tell whether the metal is gold or silver, but he is inclined to think it is gold. Whenever he walks over one of the selected spots with the witch hazel held aloft in his hands, the rod bends down violently and holds there without a quiver, though it is continually shaking and wobbling about when held above great streams of water. For these reasons, he is certain that valuable minerals await the digger who will try his skill upon the Mallett farm. The story of old Abner Mallett and his hidden gold goes back to the closing years of the war. At that time Mallett was one of the richest men in Penobscot County, having made money from farming and stock raising, as well as from selling supplies to the crews of the lumbermen. Mallett was an ardent Democrat of the Copperhead class. He was not an agitator nor a politician, but he was opposed to the war and firmly believed the South would win in the end. Sometime in 1863, before the capture of Vicksburg and before the Battle of Gettysburg turned the tide in favor of the Northern armies, Old Man Mallett took $10,000 to Bangor and exchanged his greenbacks for $4,000 in gold, paying every premium for the sake of getting the precious money. He showed it to the storekeeper on his way home, and called in several neighbors to see his purchase. The last time any outsider looked at his treasure was at a party he held in October 1863, when he brought out 3 bags of eagles and half-eagles and poured them upon a table in the presence of about 30 neighbors. "That's enough to see me through and carry me," said the old man with a chuckle. "Gold is good, no matter which side wins. I'm going to hide it where nobody but myself can find it, and then let them take my farm and confiscate all I've got, if they want to do so. They can't get hold of my money where I live." The price of gold kept advancing for some time after that, so that Mallett might have sold out at a profit and put his money in the government bonds if he had wished, but nobody ever heard him say he regretted the act or wished to make the exchange. The next winter, while driving a yoke of steers home from the blacksmith shop, he fell from the sled and a runner passed over him and left him dead in the road. After the funeral, his 2 surviving children made a long hunt for the missing gold, but failed to find it, or any record of where it had been put. During the next 3 or 4 years, a good part of the farm was plowed up and thoroughly searched for the treasure with no better results. At the end of 10 years, the unprofitable quest was abandoned. Since then Mallett's daughter, who lived on the farm, has died, and his son has moved to another county, while the place has been sold to strangers. The story of Mallett and his buried gold was nearly forgotten when Davis came here to locate a well on the place, and happened to hear the old tale. Though not a specialist in mineralogy, Davis believes he could find hidden money as well as hidden water. After making a few trials with a new hazel stick, he feels sure he has found something out of the common. At present the ground is soft and very wet for 20 inches on the surface, below which are 10 inches of hard frost. When this thaws out, which will be about May the 20th, the diggers will begin work. Davis said the rod indicates that the treasure is buried about 6 feet underground, and he believes that the former diggers would have found it if they had dug far enough. That's the end of the story, but as a side note, despite the plans to make another recovery attempt that coming spring, old Abner Mallett's buried gold was never reported found at that time, or any time since. Here's a lost treasure story that appeared in a New York State newspaper on August 30th, 1912. The facts pertaining to Clopper Smith's hoard are as follows. Der Clopper was a very brutal and much feared knight of the road on the west shores of the Hudson from Nyack to the Catskills, and he robbed the wealthy Dutch in an unmerciful manner. He had no opportunities for spending his ill-gotten wealth, and hoarded it somewhere. At last he was captured and before his execution at Newburgh, confided to a keeper who had been kind to him, that he had sacks of gold and silver and jewels buried in a spot on Storm King Mountain, just north of Cornwall on Hudson, some 35 miles north of New York City. No search has ever been made. This lost treasure story is from a newspaper article dated August 30th, 1912. It was known for many years that on Lord Edmiston's estate near West Edmiston, New York, his personal representative, Pertifer Carr, had buried a treasure. The property known as the Burdick Farm, having been bought by Henry F. Burdick in 1850, was the site. In 1904 a tenant named Cheeseborough plowed into a case of china and glass, breaking half of it, before he realized what the obstruction was. By reason of design and quality the remainder, however, was worth a small fortune to dealers in antiques. It was the Edmiston ware. The lawsuit that followed for possession made the case famous. Where is the remainder of the treasure? This lost treasure story is out of a newspaper from August 30th, 1910. Walter Butler, the notorious Mohawk Valley Tory, returned to the valley at the end of the war with a force of Tories and Indians to dig up the treasures he had buried and those that had been buried by other wealthy Tories, who had told him where to recover it on his behalf. When he had finished his work and was returning, the pursuing colonials under Colonel Marinus Willett overtook the treasure squad beyond Johnson's Hall on the bank of the West Canada in northern Herkimer County. The treasure was too heavy for the fleeing party, so they dumped it into the shallows and horses were ridden through the water to make it muddy. Butler was killed, the raiders driven away, and the spoils await present-day seekers. Today, all of the West Canada Creek is classified and protected under the New York State Wild Scenic and Recreational Rivers System Act. There is a link in the description box for more info. Also, more information on Revolutionary War activities near West Canada Creek can be found on the Wiki website. There is a link in the description box. And now it's time to move on to our Lost Treasure Found stories. We actually have 2 Lost Treasure Found stories in this episode that we're going to bring up to you now. The first one is there's a very good chance that there's more lost treasure still on the site. Of course, that's the case with most Lost Treasure Found stories. There's always a chance that there's more waiting to be found on the site. With the Christmas season here, this lost treasure story is from a Saguache, Colorado newspaper article of December 26, 1930. Buried treasure. Cans full of gold pieces. Hundreds of dollars. Thousands of dollars, perhaps millions. This was not fiction here. Saguache was thrown into a fever of excitement over the discovery of a bona fide treasure. Mrs. Drusilla O'Neill, widow of the late Johnny O'Neill, wealthy pioneer sportsman, made the discovery while cleaning out an oil house. Johnny O'Neill, it is said, was well supplied with the world's goods. He was reported to have a substantial amount of gold when he died February 25, 1927. He made no mention of his gold on his deathbed. Although he hadn't mentioned it, no one doubted the existence of a vast fortune of gold somewhere about the O'Neill place. With the wearing search of months of failure, they gave up. It's there somewhere, persisted old-timers, but the younger generation of San Luis Valley smiled. Just a myth, they said. Another old settler story, like the prospector's lost mine. Gradually old-timers ceased to talk about Johnny O'Neill's gold. And then one day, Mrs. O'Neill was cleaning out an oil house. Her broom struck a large can. It wouldn't move. Mrs. O'Neill stooped and pried up the lid. There lay the O'Neill fortune, in gold. Hundreds of $20 gold pieces. Search revealed 2 more cans similarly filled. Other heirs of the O'Neill fortune, besides the widow, include 2 daughters living in Saguache, and Mrs. Blanche Lanso of Portland, Oregon, another daughter. The amount of gold discovered was not revealed, but many estimated it in the thousands of dollars. This newspaper article from Webster City, Iowa, September 26, 1906 carried this story of lost treasure found, but there is a good chance that more gold is there still waiting to be found. Frank Blint, a Lee County farmer, has come into possession of a large fortune in the most unusual manner, having found among the rubbish at the bottom of an old well, cans containing $50,000 in gold. The farm upon which this great wealth was found, was formerly owned by a man named Courtwright, a wealthy miser. Courtwright always had been reputed to be wealthy, but when he died, the administrator was unable to find much of the money he was said to have possessed. Courtwright would not trust banks, but instead hid his wealth away in various places upon the farm where he lived. Now that the treasure from the well has come to light, there is no telling how much more may be hidden away upon the farm. The house had not been occupied for a number of years prior to Blunt's occupancy, and people in that part of the country thought it haunted. Blunt purchased the Courtwright farm some months ago for a song. He put many repairs upon it, and began to enlarge his cistern. When at the bottom, turning dirt, the spade struck a chest, which when brought forth, was found to contain several thousands of dollars. Blunt was more than satisfied with his investment, but after unearthing the chest, did not dream of what was yet to come. It so happened that the old well needed cleaning, and went down to do the work. In the rubbish at the bottom, he found not 1, but 10 cans filled with gold coin to the value of $50,000. Courtright had no known heirs, so Blint has the only claim upon the money found. As a side note to this story, it might pay somebody big time to make another search of this property since nobody knew how much gold Mr. Courtright buried. There could be more there. Much, much more.